Hi, welcome to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I'm Dr. Aisha Dickerson, and you usually hear Dr. Harrison Davis as well, but he left me tonight. Harrison is, as you all know, a huge Atlanta Falcons fan, and he is going to see that football game. And so, as much as jealous as I am, and as much as I'm going to miss him, I have another therapist here with me tonight. We are going to talk a little bit about some sports psychology. But before that, let me tell those of you who haven't seen us about Two Therapists and a Microphone. We are a show about mental health, relationships, and social issues that personally affect you. We broadcast live every Thursday evening at 7:30, or actually 7 o'clock p.m. on the R Black Media Network. We're two licensed psychotherapists with decades of clinical experience, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear about the situations or dilemmas that you're going through. So send us your questions by visiting our webpage, www.twotherapist.com, and click on Ask Two Therapists at the top of the page. Okay, so back to sports. There's been a lot of stuff in the news lately. Kind of about, I'll say Herschel Walker because he's a football player who, for those of you who don't know, is running for a Senate position, a U.S. Senate position, as one of Georgia's senators. So a lot has come up about how appropriate is it for a football player to be a politician. Does he have all kind of mental health issues? I mean, he did say that he has dissociative identity disorder. We talked about that on a previous show. But in addition to that, what made me think about this topic is a recent story about Joshua Primo. Now, let me say, I'm not that familiar with Joshua. I don't watch a whole lot of basketball. Maybe some of y'all can tell me about him. But what I do know from what I read in the news is that Joshua was seeing a sports counselor, sports or sports psychologist through the NBA. Now, I'm going to start. I'm going to come back to that, but first, I want to introduce our guest, and he is Jascar Petian. He's a current fourth year doctoral student in the Counselor Education and Practice program at Georgia State University. His primary research interests include athletes and mental health, sports psychology, and student athletes' wellness. He has experience working with a variety of populations, such as athletes and substance use in individual, family, and couple modalities. Gaskar was the recipient of the 2021 MBCC Fellowship, yay, and was named a CSI Leadership Fellow. So I am super excited to have him with me tonight to be my second therapist on Two Therapists and the Microphone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It works because we're both therapists. So yeah, still two
That's
therapists.
right. And we both have microphones, so it's still two
That's
therapists
right.
in the microphone. Okay,
That's
y'all.
right.
So what I saw about Joshua, and I'm going to pull up the article so I won't get too far off and start making stuff up, is that he was seeing a sports psychologist for. We don't know what the reasons are. I don't know what the reasons are. I don't know if they all just see the psychologist for no reason. But this woman, Dr. Hillary Coffin, said that Joshua exposed himself to her not once, but multiple times. She says that she also told the San Antonio Spurs about what happened, and they said they would handle it, but they didn't. So she continued to see him. Apparently, he exposed himself again. And later on, they said that they didn't trust her. They didn't need her to work with the team anymore. And she was released. Not released like fired, but they did not renew her contract. So once that happened, she decided to file a lawsuit. And also, from what I'm hearing, she's not the only one who he allegedly exposed himself to. Now, I haven't found all the information on that, but she was the one who told the basketball team. And now, also later on, I believe he was released. I'm not. I'm assuming it might have had a little something to do with this, but it leads me to think about not just athletes, rappers, rich guys in general who feel like they could do whatever they whatever they
Yeah.
want to do. And I know that for the athletes, sports psychology is a thing now. So my first question is, how long has sports psychology actually been a thing? Is this new? I mean, we're hearing about it more. I know I saw it on
hmm
that HBO show. what's it called with the soccer coach?
Ted
It
Lasso.
one of them. Yes, Ted Lasso. They had a sports psychologist on there too, right?
Yeah,
When the guy
I heard a
killed the
lot
dog
about
with
that
the
show.
soccer ball. Yeah, yeah, it's a good one. I
Mhm.
like it. Didn't care too much for the sports psychologist on there, but maybe you watch that and tell me what you think about it. But how long has sports psychology been a thing?
Yeah, it's been a thing for a long time. There's like, definite like pioneers that kind of started the field, but it tends to work in the background. It tends to be
Okay.
a thing like in the background. It's not a thing where the practitioners are highly publicized, or players are like, this is my sports psychologist, and I'm working with them. For a while, it's been working with a therapist in a sports context has been like highly stigmatized. So I
Mhm.
think we're just now reaching a point where it's kind of okay to share that you are working with a sports psychologist. But if I had to put a time on it, I'd say that probably like 20 to 30 years or so now, there's been
Okay.
sports psychologists working with different athletes. And those psychologists, they don't only work with in athletic context, they work in other performance industries, whether it's
Mhm.
you know singing or dancing, any kind of performing, even
Okay.
military populations. So it's a pretty big thing, popular thing.
Okay. So it's still though fairly new, 20 to 30 years. I mean, that's younger than me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
like to think I'm
yeah,
young, but the truth
yeah,
is I'm not. So that's still
yeah.
pretty young. And
Mhm.
so if I'm understanding correctly, a lot of the teams now will have a sports psychologist on staff.
Yes, absolutely. So in various leagues, so let me give you an example. In the NFL, each team has a staffed clinician.
Okay.
Those clinicians can come from a variety of different disciplines: social work, psychology, or even counselors. I know that there's some counselors that um, work amongst those teams. In the NBA, they have like a registry where different clinicians are on that registry to be able to work with uh, the players, and then they also have team therapists, staff team therapists as well. And Major League has, some Major League Baseball has something similar as well. So in the professional world, like the professional leagues, sports leagues, it's pretty normalized. And the NCAA, they're kind of like just getting to it. They
Okay.
actually created a rule not too long ago, I think in 2019, where it is mandated for NCAA member institutions to have access to a mental health professional for the athletes. So,
Oh, that's
yeah.
great. I would
Mhm.
imagine that is more needed there than anywhere else because those are I was about to say children, but they're adults. But they're not just playing sports; they're going to
For sure.
school, and there's a lot to juggle
Yeah,
around that.
absolutely. They're 18 to 22-year-old usually, um, you know, athletes that are kind of getting to be on their own for the first time, and athletics in the NCAA and college is like a job. That's something that I forgot to put in my bio. I was a track athlete at South
Oh,
Florida, so yeah.
okay.
So
So you know from personal experience.
yes, yeah, it's a job, and it can be pretty taxing. It's a really vulnerable time as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I thought about that. Those of you who listen to the show have heard me mention my child who plays volleyball, and she said that she's not sure she wants to play in college because she thinks it will take away from her college experience. And I mean, I don't know how easy it's going to be for them to get her up at 4 o'clock in the morning for workouts. I don't know if she can get up without me, but I mean, it's something that I'm considering. Is it mentally healthy to have her doing
Yeah,
all of that plus doing school plus trying to be social, be in any organizations? I mean,
yeah,
it's just something to keep in mind. But I think
for sure.
a sports psychologist, sports counselor would definitely be helpful with that. But that leads me to my next question. What would be the benefit of going to that specific type of therapist versus, any other private practice therapist?
Yeah. So the kind of key thing with going to see a sports counselor or sports psychologist is that they should, right? They should have an idea of how it is to be an athlete, right? They should have knowledge about the athlete lifestyle, and what kind of requirements and things that you are uh, that you're required to do to be an athlete. And so what that looks like is the schedule, the impact on your body, the impact on your mind, different people that you have to kind of be in front of, being a part of a team, those kinds of things. And then having enough left in the tank for yourself and your own mental health. So um, while athletes are whole people, right? And sports is a microcosm of society. There is that aspect of performing and your performance on the field, on the court, or on the track, whatever it is that you play, playing a large role in like your overall well-being. And so while therapists are trained to kind of work with humans normally in a very general way, and we're able to clinically provide services for athletes, in a variety, clinically provide services for the general population. A sports therapist has a unique knowledge base about what it is like to be an athlete, and when working with those athletes, we kind of like integrate that into our practice.
Okay. So does that mean that I couldn't be a sports counselor because I didn't do sports?
No, that doesn't mean that
Okay.
you can't be that. No, that just means that you would have a little bit of an extra learning curve, in
Okay.
terms of just understanding the dynamics at play in athletic organizations. But there are plenty of therapists that are working amongst athletes that are not prior athletes. So yeah, no, it's
Okay.
yeah.
Well, so one of the things that the woman who worked with Joshua Primo said was that working with the Spurs was her dream job.
Yeah.
I imagine, and you let me know because I have no idea, that part of that would be the pay. Are sports psychologists, sports counselors paid? I mean, like big money, like they work for the NBA and the NFL? Is that
Yeah.
NBA,
So
NFL money?
let me give you some like actual stats, right? So like
Okay.
and those, because there was a study that was done recently. I think it came out with the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. Someone did a study about the kind of like the salary ranges for sports or people that work in performance psychology. And let me make it clear that this kind of goes on the spectrum of like faculty members, right? Because there are people that that have done sports counseling or sports psychology, and they're faculty members. And then there's people that actually work in their own private practice or in like contract jobs or in their own professional situations. The median reported salary in this industry is 70,000. And I know what you're thinking, is like, really? I know that. But this is the thing, the standard deviation, and for those of you that aren't maybe
It's like
familiar
you about to have to give us a stats class.
yeah, for those of you that aren't familiar with the research language, it's just like the next number, if you will, right?
Yeah,
So
we'll say
like
the next tier up. So this
correct.
70,000 is the middle.
Middle,
And so the
exactly.
next step up is
Yeah, the standard deviation is like 400,000 over it could be like 400,000. Yeah, exactly. So it's very like
that's
wide,
a big
like
jump. So
yeah.
you get right out in the field. 70,000 is more than the average.
Yeah.
And then you could jump up to 400,000. I went the wrong way.
Yeah, but
I didn't even know this was a thing back when I was in school.
I mean, sports organizations, they have lots of capital, so it is something that tends to normally pay well, even if you're doing something privately, even if you're not working directly for an institution. So yeah, it does pay well, and that is definitely a draw. But I also think that it's just a population that kind of needs for mental health services to be normalized. And so I feel like along with getting paid or getting compensated well, that's another big draw for me, especially having my own history within sports and seeing a therapist that way.
Okay. So, my thing when I read the article about Joshua was that the therapist told the organization, and allegedly Joshua continued to expose himself to her. I'm thinking maybe because she was making so much money that that may have had a part in why she didn't quit or why she didn't stop working with him. I don't know. I don't want to assume anything there, but I do want to ask you in this case, what was her responsibility? Like, are you required to tell the team everything that you're talking about with the athlete, or
Yeah.
is that a violation of of the athlete's privacy? Because I'm thinking as a therapist, I'm supposed to keep your stuff secret.
Yeah, it's a good question and a tough one to answer. I think that there's some definite, confidentiality at play here for sure. Just because as therapists, we kind of work under the agreement of confidentiality between us and
Mhm.
our client. In this particular case, there is some kind of sexual assault or sexual, I don't know, deviance.
Violation. There's a
Yeah, yeah, at play
violation
here.
of her
So
boundaries. Mhm.
and I think the identities do matter as well. Like 'cause she's a woman, and he's a male. So in terms of her responsibility, I don't I think that I don't fault her for kind of going to the team and saying, hey, this is an issue. Because if this behavior exists in this space, then I think it might be helpful for them to know and to prepare for it in other spaces. Now, with that being said, I think that a conversation would have to have been had between myself and that client to be like, hey, this is something that I might be bringing up. This is not okay, and this is something that I might be having to bring up outside of here because at this point I'm being harmed,
Mhm.
which is exactly what was happening. So, very a very sensitive situation, and it's super unfortunate for her to have, I don't know, lost her job around it. But I also think just as a professional, she should be respected, and it's very clear that this situation she wasn't um, being respected and kept safe. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I think when you're another thing that as sports psychologists or sports uh, therapists, you have to also think about working for an organization and like just representing them.
Mhm.
And so there's when for a counselor or a psychologist working in a sports context or for an organization or athletic team, you also have to think about the many moving parts when it comes to you know clinical work amongst the athletes.
Okay. Okay. So, according to Joshua's attorneys, this is the statement that what they said was that Dr. Hillary Cawthon's accusations are uh, a- launched the accusations, excuse me, to use ugly stereotypes and racially charged fears for her own financial gain. That her allegations are either a complete fabrication, a gross embellishment, or utter fantasy. Not they don't know which one, but it's one of these things. And that Josh Primo never intentionally exposed himself to her or anyone else and was not even aware that his private parts were visible outside of his workout shorts. But as I said, turns out he exposed himself to a few other people.
Exactly.
Now,
Exactly.
he's not the only one. When I was looking this up, also Antonio Brown came up, the ex NFL player who exposed himself at a pool party. And there was another before who exposed himself to a woman who was hanging a picture or something in his house. I can't remember what his name was, but like, is this a thing now? What's up with these athletes?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's not a thing. uh, I don't want to, those three, terrible, horrible examples definitely don't represent all athletes. It's definitely not a thing. I think those are isolated incidents related to three very, in the case of Antonio Bryant, there's a lot of different, um, there's a lot of things out there that kind of show the type of person he's been known to be.
This is true.
Um, so I think anyone that's seeing that saw that news was not necessarily surprised. But and, you know, and his mental health has definitely been a conversation, something of conversation lately as well. You know, which he says that he doesn't have any mental health issues or anything like that, but you know, his actions don't say so. Um, you know, and so in with all these incidents, I definitely think that there needs to be kind of more looked at in terms of what these particular athletes were kind of like trying to get out of that situation.
Mhm.
Why exactly they, you know, felt it was appropriate and necessary to expose themselves in front of these people. Particularly for Josh Primo, you know, I would venture to say that there is, you know, maybe some sort of, you know, I'm not diagnosing him, but you know, there's maybe some sort of like, you know, this disorder at play. So,
Yeah, and
um,
he said that he's been seeking help to deal with previous trauma. He said,
sure,
I suffer and will now take this time to focus on my mental health treatment more fully. But
yeah,
also, I think sometimes like things are blamed on mental health. So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
there may
yeah,
be some trauma on one hand, but on the other hand, how much of it is just that, I think I'm fine and everybody should get to see how fine
yeah.
I am.
Yeah, no, you know, as somebody as a therapist working in sports, you definitely have to use your discretion in terms of like what is able to be considered a true and actual mental health issue. Um, and you know, I think that there's a very fine line with that, and I think that's where kind of like having like that knowledge and information really helps, about, you know, what, you know, the requirements and the things needed to be a part of a team, the obligations that you had that are at play there, because you can kind of like see through some of the things that, you know, the athletes are bringing up. Maybe they just kind of want to get out of playing, or you know, also there's also the fact that they've, you know, probably got some sort of actual disorder, and it's important for, you know, the sports therapist to be able to use their discretion. But I also, you know, I caution, you know, us getting thinking about how maybe athletes might be, you know, using it to kind of as a scapegoat to kind of like get a break and stuff like that, because
Mhm.
that also further stigmatizes, you know, mental health within sports. So it's a
That's true.
slippery slope, and that's why, you know, it pays to have really good, knowledgeable therapists on your team.
You are absolutely right. Well, two of the biggest names that have come up recently when it comes to athlete mental health, I'm sorry, mental health of athletes is the way I'm going to say it, and working with a mental health professional is Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. I hope I'm pronouncing her
Yeah,
name
you
right.
said
I
it
don't,
right.
I don't really watch a whole lot of tennis unless Serena's
Mhm.
playing. But what I do know about Naomi is she left the French Open because of her mental health, and there have been other times when she has withdrawn from things or just
Mhm.
or been upset during a match because people boo her or they say something mean. And
Mhm.
I've heard a lot of backlash that she's gotten. Like, you're supposed to be strong as
Mhm.
an athlete. You can't make people stop booing. It's just a part of sports. If you can't take it, quit.
Mhm.
So, tell me, what are your thoughts about that? How mentally strong are athletes expected to be? And if they aren't, I'm going to just keep saying mentally strong. What do you do as a sports counselor to help them build that strength?
Yeah, great question. I'm glad you're
And I
asking
know
this. So,
there are a few pieces, so let me know if I need
for
to
sure.
repeat any
Yeah,
of them.
no, I think I remember it. So first and foremost, you said how strong do our athletes expected to be.
Hmm.
So yeah, with Naomi Osaka, you know, I followed her for a long time. She's actually of Haitian descent, and I'm also of Haitian descent.
Okay.
So um, I'm a pretty much a fan of hers, if you will. And
Okay.
for her, she rose to fame pretty quickly in terms
Hmm.
of
This is true.
tennis star. So she's one of the youngest Grand Slam champions. And if those that don't know, Grand Slam is a really highly coveted or highly contested tennis tournament. Serena has the most in history because she's the greatest.
Yeah.
But yeah,
She
so she's one of the youngest. Naomi Osaka is one of the youngest Grand Slam champions, and as soon as she kind of rose to stardom, she started getting a lot of news, press, and attention that she wasn't necessarily used to. And now all that news, press, and attention on top of having to perform athletically, which is already a very high pressure environment, right? So I didn't, I wasn't competing professionally, but when I was, always thinking about what it would look like for me to fail, right? And what it would look like for me to not meet expectations that, my team had of me or coaches or whatnot. And so not only does Naomi have to deal with the expectations of her team, coaches, but she has to deal with expectations of the press and of fans, et cetera, et cetera. And so because of that, that kind of pressure is like crushing. That kind of pressure, it becomes internalized. You start to, judge yourself by, how well you're doing on the court, how well you're competing, and how well you are, making, those around you look, and how well you're making yourself look. And that internalization, it can be really harmful because you start to, as an athlete, you start to externalize success.
Okay.
And so the only way that you begin to feel good is that, those accolades, those trophies. And when you don't get those things, and when you don't get the wins, it can be really crippling on your, just overall well-being. And along with the press and the news, and having basically just an open sounding board about how everyone feels about you via social media and
Yeah.
the press. Yeah. And so, with her, it makes a lot of sense because she was a, high profile star for her to, need to take a break. And I was really happy when she did. And, she's since has come back and been in plenty tournaments, and, has done well. And, it seems like she's much more, a much more whole person, right? It doesn't seem like tennis is the only thing that defines her anymore. I don't want to speak for her, but it just seems like that way from the outside coming in. And I think that, as a counselor, or as a sports counselor, that's the goal, right? To continue to make sure that this thing that, that they identify with heavily is still important to them, but that they don't forget like who they are outside of it. Because, again, sports is a microcosm of society, and athletes are people. And so we don't want Naomi to, even though it's glorified, right? Playing through toughness and playing through hurt and pain and all that stuff. We don't want her to forget about who she is, right? And all the great things that she has to offer outside of being a really successful tennis star.
I get that. What I'm also seeing is that these athletes are quitting in really big places, like the French Open for Naomi and the Olympics for Simone. It's like,
Yeah.
if you weren't going to do it, someone else could have had that spot.
Yeah. A lot of folks say they feel like they can't handle the moment, or what have you.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it probably affects their performance when
Yeah.
they're and it's funny that you brought up social media, because I really didn't think about that. When I think,
Hmm.
sports psychology is fairly new, or how strong are these new athletes? The old athletes didn't have to deal with social media. I mean, you might read a news article where
Yeah.
someone says something mean about you. It's printed, it might get
Mm.
to you, it might not. You can ball it up, you can throw it away, and after a few days it's gone. But the internet is forever, and people
Yep.
feel like they can and should tell you whatever is on their mind about you.
Yeah. Social media has taken away the distance between whether it be celebrities or athletes and, the general population. So all of these opinions are kind of like are in the universe for them to see and absorb. And as you can imagine, that could be quite taxing. And it's not only in social media, it's also just general media, right? There's
Hmm.
a constant news cycle whenever things are happening. And so that can be very taxing and very overwhelming when all you want to do is kind of think about, well, all you want to do is kind of be a human, but also all you want to do is think about making sure you're prepared for the match the next day, or making sure you're ready for a game. And so with her um with her, I think one of the things that I've noticed too is that she had to be in front of press every time that she after she played, and they would ask, they ask you all kinds of questions. So
Hmm.
on top of dealing with the social media, and news stories, there's talking to press. So it's a very taxing thing. And I think people kind of put athletes on a pedestal, or because they feel like they have superhuman athletic abilities.
Or,
you know
they're rich, so they should be okay because
yeah,
money does buy
yeah,
happiness. So, just
yeah.
go spend your money and be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the and obviously they're very well compensated for the things that they do, but they're still human at the end of the day. And so we'd have to ask ourselves the question of, and us, if we were in that position, would we be able to successfully do all that they're doing without it having any impact on our mental health? And just have some empathy for these folks, because they're doing a lot. It's extremely taxing.
Yeah, because back in the day, hecklers could only heckle or say mean things to you if they had enough money to afford a ticket to see your game.
Yeah,
And now, every broke boy can have a free social media
yeah.
account and try to connect with you.
Yeah, and also the environments at the games too. Like I remember Odell Beckham Jr., who was he's a free agent right now, but he's a wide receiver
Mhm.
for the NFL. He compared like being an athlete to like being a zoo animal, because when you
Mm.
get into the games, when you go to the games, like people are screaming all kinds of things to you. They're saying all kind of expletives, or all just everything under the sun. And we need to remember that athletics, while it is a competition, is also entertainment. And
It
so
is.
people go there to be entertained. And I think is kind of what goes into like the psyche of folks that feel like, oh, athletes need to be stronger because they're paying for entertainment. But again, they're people as well. And I think that's something that we need to consider.
Okay. All right. Last person I want to talk about tonight.
Oh gosh.
Herschel Walker. So
Mm.
we mentioned them in the beginning. And I don't know if you got a chance to watch the debate with Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, but Herschel mentioned that he has dissociative identity disorder. And we explained it to our listeners before, that is what we used to refer to as having multiple personalities. And
Mm.
Herschel says that he didn't need therapy and no one needs therapy. He just talks to his pastor and he's okay. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, so first of all, he's running for public office, which is a high profile position. And
Hmm.
so I think that context definitely needs to come into play when we think about this. Um, Also, um, that can, what he said, his phrase of, he didn't need a therapist, is, pretty stigmatizing. If we think about like just what therapy looks like for the Black community in general, it's already pretty stigmatized. So that didn't come off, um, that great, for the general public. I don't believe. I think that I remember I did a panel discussion, and I heard someone say prayer and a professional. And so
Right, you can do
having
both. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
exactly. Exactly. So being able, you can obviously definitely see a pastor, or some sort of clergy clergyman or clergy person that belongs to a church, but also, mental health counselors and therapists are there, to help and to assist you in kind of like reaching your goals. And I think that it would have been super helpful for him to be able to see someone when that was going on, because I can't imagine how that kind of DID has progressed from up to this point. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with seeing a therapist, as well as seeing somebody that belongs to a church. Prayer and a professional, I feel like we work from a clinical standpoint, and we are able to do things more objectively, and while having much respect for different religions and faiths and all that stuff, while also being knowledgeable about like clinical aspects that affect people in terms of different orientations or disorders that they might present when they show up to our offices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are sports counselors and sports psychologists, do they receive any special training for working with people who have concussions? Like, would you assess for that? Because we all know Herschel's has some concussions, and
Yeah.
there might be some other developmental issues there that we're not aware of. But are you
For
trying to
sure.
assess for that?
So no, we leave. Sports counselors probably would leave that to the medical profession to assess
Okay.
for, because that's not something that's usually in our training. I don't believe for sports psychologists it is something in their training as well. Now, if we believe that an athlete kind of was suffering from having too many concussions or repeated head trauma, would we refer out and refer them to a medical professional? I think that we could, use our clinical judgment to say that there is some sort of developmental, delay here, or developmental issue here, and that, this person would probably benefit from some sort of medical attention related to that thing. And yeah, I feel like, he definitely likely has had many concussions based on his, past as a running back for college and in the NFL as well. So, I think just in general, with him running for public office, I think anyone should be able to run for public office. That's like the
That's part of being an
role of
American. Anybody can
exactly.
run.
That's the role of
Hmm.
democracy. I don't have any issue. I don't think there should be any issue with him running for public office. But based on some of the things that have come out in light of his him running for public office, we should definitely pay a little bit close attention to what he says, and how he orients himself to the his constituents and his voters, if you will.
Well said, Mr. Petion. Thank you. Well, that is it for my questions tonight. Can you please let our viewers know where they can find you if they're looking for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is Giscard S. Petion. I'm only on Instagram right now. I have to redo my Facebook and all that stuff. Take a break from social media, but yeah, right now you can find me at Giscard S. Petion on Instagram. I have a profile on there. So yeah, and then I have email too. You can email me at giscardspetion@gmail.com if you have any questions or you'd like me to elaborate on some of the points I made. I'd love to talk to you about any of this stuff that I just talked about.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate you coming and joining me tonight to be my second therapist on Two Therapists and a Microphone. Harrison and I will be back next week at 7 p.m., streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. As always, you can find us at www.twotherapists.com, and you can find us on Instagram at 2TM Show, and Twitter, same 2TM Show, or look us up on Facebook. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for having me.
like this. I 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 like this.